Before introducing the presenter, I would like to go over some housekeeping rules. If you do have any questions during the presentation, you can raise your hand and I will enable your mic, and thereafter you can ask your question. Or if you are feeling a little shy and don't want to chat or don't want to speak, you can type your question in the chat. I will then alert Dr. Gabriel and he will address your question. On to the second order of business, we have a feedback survey, and I will be posting this feedback survey in the chat. And the reason for this survey is because we want to gain insights as to whether this workshop has been helpful and also how we can improve going forward in terms of if we would be preparing workshops within the similar theme. Also, it gives you an opportunity to thank the presenter or the facilitator, in this case, Dr. Gabriel, for all of his effort and his time. And lastly, by filling in the survey, this ensures that you receive a certificate of attendance. So before moving on, I would like to just touch on the fact that we have now launched a management system. And if you're unaware, RCDMS is here to streamline your research journey. If you are not yet registered, you can go to the ULink tab, which is central to the University of Johannesburg. You navigate and click on the Services tab and navigate to click on the RCDMS tab, and then thereafter you can register. However, if you are having a bit of an issue, we do have digital onboarding sessions that are running from the 9th to the 23rd of this month from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. And I will be posting the link to that meeting in the chat as well. So you can just log on and we will assist you with any challenges that you're facing. Alternatively, if you feel like the digital onboarding is not for you and you want to face, my colleague Lawrence will be at the APK campus on the 16th and 17th of this month from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. and he will be assisting you with your registration. So without further ado, I'm going to be introducing our presenter, Dr. Gabriel. Dr. Gabriel Monera brings a wealth of experience as a former assistant lecturer, high school educator, and current research writing specialist. His research focuses on trade policy, export promotion, foreign direct investment, and regional integration in Africa. Dr. Gabriel is committed to helping researchers achieve scholarly excellence through effective writing. Without further ado, I want to hand over to Dr. Gabriel.
Thank you so much, Ms. Andrea, for introducing me. And also, I just want to thank the participants for joining us in this session for today. I think some are carrying over from the workshop that we just had from 10 a.m. to 12. Whilst I'm sharing my slides with you, I would just like by show of virtual thumb that you can hear me well, and also when you can see the slides, do let me know as well that you can see the slides that I've shared with you. Okay, thank you. I see an indication that you can see the slides that I've shared with you. So we are sort of, this is a complementary session to the one that we had this morning, where the theme we are focusing on fundamentals of research writing. So we have looked at issues of language, we have looked at grammar and sentence structure in the previous session, and in this session we will be focusing on another three aspects, that is clarity, conciseness, and precision in academic writing, where I will give some strategies that can be used to improve clarity, conciseness, and precision in academic writing. Right. So this is the outline of the presentation. I'll just introduce for us to have an understanding of what academic writing entails, and also why are we having this conversation. I think much of the presentation will be focused on clarity, conciseness, and precision. Before I just give some concluding remarks and open the floor for sort of an open discussion or question and contributions. Where we can just share, even if you have anything that you want to share with us. But anywhere along the course of the presentation, if you feel that you need to ask a question or to share an experience or to contribute to the conversation that we are having, you are welcome to do so. Okay, so what is this? When we talk of academic writing, what are we talking about? I think we have heard a lot about academic writing. We have written before. We have written in academic settings. That's why I'm sure that the audience that is here, we are having at least holders of an honors degree, and going further maybe to a PhD or others who are now doing postdoctoral research fellowship. But we have been writing. But what is it that we call academic writing? So this is sort of an essential skill for conveying research, analysis, and argumentation in a clear, concise, and precise manner. Right. So those are three aspects that we are going to be focusing on in this presentation: clarity, conciseness, and precision within the context of academic writing. So the primary goal of academic writing is to communicate complex ideas effectively to a knowledgeable audience. But even if you can communicate it to an audience that does not know, what really you are talking about, but will be able to understand you from the manner that we have written, then that becomes a good a piece of research. So you are not writing for an expert audience, or you are not writing only for the audience within your field, but you are writing even for a layman who is just walking in the street and be able to understand the essence of your research, or what is it that the message that you are trying to convey. So why are we having this conversation? So by the end of this presentation, what I'm going to leave with you are strategies that you can use to improve clarity, conciseness, and precision, ensuring that your writing is impactful and understandable, which is the essence of research. If it's not impactful, then in terms of a career, it doesn't benefit you in terms of a career. And if it's not understandable, then why even doing the research if no one is going to understand what you are doing? Because remember, you're not writing for yourself, but you're writing with an audience in mind, and that audience, you have to understand the message that you want to convey to them in the manner that you intended to convey the message. So it also makes communication more effective, making your writing not only impactful, but also more likely to achieve its intended purpose, like I've just alluded to. Okay, so these are the characteristics of academic writing. We know that academic writing is formal, so there's an issue of that language is impersonal, it's objective, and avoids colloquial expressions. Those are some of the things that we have already spoken in the previous session that we had, that relates to how do we construct sentences, that relates to the issues of grammar, sentence structure, and also just some language rules, right? So for academics, it's formal, right? So which means we use a formal tone, and also it's analytical, so which means it involves analyzing data, concepts, and perspectives critically. You have to add value. So it's not just a collection of information, then you just I once read a review that came from a journal. This is the essence of that. When you are publishing in a scholarly community, the journals usually you have a blind peer review policy, right? Why is that in place? So that your work can also be evaluated by experts within the field for suitability for publication, for it to become a scholarly piece of writing. But one of the reviewers said that you accused the writer of dumping facts, right? They call it fact dumping. So in other words, you are just throwing facts. There's no evaluation of what you are talking about. You are not approaching it from a critical perspective, right? So it is very important that you add value. You don't just build a library by collecting information, but you add value to that. So you have to look for particular trends, variations, agreements, disagreements, areas of controversy, what kind of methods were used, and so on. And also um, put your sense into the conversation as well, right? So then there's it has to be clear. The writing should be straightforward and easily understood. So that is the clarity part. Precise language is specific, and the meaning of words is exact. So you don't have to if you use a wrong word, then that becomes you're violating grammatical rules. So at the end, the message that you want to convey to the reader is distorted. Then it have to be concise. So only the necessary information should be included to avoid wordiness. So this I was going to say it later, but let me say it now. That I sometimes give an example of that in an academic writing. You don't have the latitude of telling us what you are going to write about, then write about it, and again tell us after that this is what I've written about. Yes, when you are speaking, public speaking, that helps to convey your message to the audience. But when you are writing, we don't have the latitude for that because that will amount to repetition, right? So we have to be straight to the point. So only necessary information should be included to avoid wordiness. Then accuracy. Claims are supported by valid evidence and proper references, right? So we cannot, journalistic writing, they can get a scoop from anywhere, and write about it. When they are asked, then they protect the source of that information. But in academics, we don't protect the source. We have to reveal our source. So which means we even go further to look at the credibility of those sources. Whoever you are citing, do they have the capacity to talk about what they are talking about? One, are they credible? To be the one, to be a source of reference for that kind of information. Then objective arguments should be based on facts, not personal beliefs or emotions. Right? So it's not about you. Right? So your arguments, you should base them on facts, not your own personal opinions or your beliefs or emotions. Critical evaluate evidence and arguments from multiple perspectives, considering strengths and weaknesses. So here I summarize academic writing by pointing out its key characteristics. Okay, so what is the importance of clarity, conciseness, and precision? So clarity on its own, it enhances the reader's understanding of the argument and makes the message accessible. Without clarity, ideas can be misinterpreted, leading to confusion. So it has to be clear. Your message has to be clear. Otherwise, if it's not clear, then it will be, conceived in a way that is, different from the manner in which you intend the message to be received. So you have conveyed a message, then it will be received wrongly, right? Conciseness helps maintain the reader's attention by removing irrelevant or repetitive information. Concise writing delivers the message efficiently without sacrificing meaning, right? I think when we were still in primary, we used to do this exercise where we would stand in a line and a message is passed by the teacher. across sort of a chain, of students. But by the time the message reaches the last person, the message is completely distorted. Right? It's now wrong. It's not what the teacher have said. So without conciseness, if you don't help the reader's attention, if you do not maintain the reader's attention by removing irrelevant or repetitive information, then the reader will get lost in the text. Right? Precision. Provide exact, well-defined information, avoiding vague statements that could lead to ambiguity. This ensures that the argument remains focused and credible. Right? So if there are any maybe particular circumstances in which you are using a particular word, then you have to state it to the reader that within the context of this study, globalization means 1, 2, 3, 4, right? In terms of the intended meaning for the purpose of your study. There are certain words, concepts, or phrases that does not have a shared meaning. There's no consensus on the meaning of that. So you have to clarify to the reader. You have to be precise in terms of the context in which you are using that phrase or you are using that word as it relates to the writing and the message that you want to convey to the reader. So these are now the strategies that you can use to improve clarity, conciseness, and precision. And I'll start with clarity, then move on with the components as we progress with the presentation. So we start with clarity, then we move to conciseness and precision. And I'll also provide examples of maybe how you can relate that to the nature, the manner in which you write, and also your text, and be able to revise as you move forward. Right. So in terms of clarity, it's important to avoid technical jargons. So you must use simple, understandable language whenever possible, especially when explaining complex concepts. So those jawbreakers, in an academic setting, it's not encouraged to do that. Of course, we do it because all the others, when I read the text of the other scholars, they have a certain level of writing that they are at. And you also need to fit within that level. So it also entails using sort of a style of writing that is at par with the text that you normally read. But for the reader, it has to be simple. You don't need that whenever someone is reading your text, then they must have a dictionary on the side. Why? Because you are using overly, big words and so on, right? So I don't need a dictionary to understand what they are writing to me about. So you have to consider your audience. These are some examples of sentences lacking clarity due to the use of overly complex words. So I'll start with the complex sentence and how it can be simplified. And from there, I think you can see that when you use complex words, if it's overly complex, the sentence usually becomes long, whilst it's supposed to be short, right? So instead of saying, subsequent to an exhaustive examination of the multifarious variables at play, a conclusive determination was made regarding the optimal course of action to mitigate the deleterious effects of the situation. I think I must repeat this again. Subsequent to an exhaustive examination of the multifarious variables at play, a conclusive determination was made regarding the optimal course of action to mitigate the deleterious effects of the situation. So this is a complex sentence that can be simplified to, after carefully looking at all the factors, we decided on the best way to fix the problem. So you can see that the simplified version is more understandable, short and straight to the point. I don't need a dictionary for me to be able to understand what the author, what the writer is trying to convey to me. Then now, when we another very important element in terms of clarity is the use of active voice. And I think when I was presenting in the first session, I said I will reserve much about this active voice to this to talk about it in this session, and I'm hoping we are having as part of the audience others who have joined us, from that previous session. So the use of active voice, when it usually have the characteristics of making the sentence clearer and more direct. Right? It's not like we are in the sentence is usually sort of referring indirectly. So in an active sentence, the subject or the person or thing doing the action, right, comes first. Okay, so the focus is on the doer of the action, right? But in a passive sentence, the object or the thing that is receiving the action comes first. So usually to spot the passive voice, you look at the form of the main verb of each sentence, right? So you look at the form of the main verb. You also look at the focus, whether the focus is placed on the receiver or the doer of the action, right? If it's placed on the receiver of the action, then it's a passive sentence. If it's placed on the doer of the action, then it becomes an active sentence. Or you look for a by phrase. If the sentence is with by, right, usually they are passive sentences, right? They are passive sentence. So when we talk about the form of the verb, the verb to be, it is, I think, about 8 forms, including present tense, past tense, present participle tense, and past participle tense, right? So usually when you see the present tense, they are normally used with I, so you have to look at the form of the verb. It can also tell you whether this is an active sentence or this is a passive sentence. Okay, so to still on spotting a passive, when you are spotting a passive voice, the form of the verb on passive sentences, it typically use the form of the verb to be, such as is, was, were, are, will be, followed by the past participle of the main verb. So as an example, you say the cake was eaten by the children. So you can see the by phrase as well. Okay, so the cake, which is the object, in this, because it's a passive sentence, that is the one that is coming first. So the focus is on the cake, but not the ones who performed the action, who are the children, okay, or the subject, right? So we are focusing on the object rather than the subject. So focus is on the receiver of the action. In passive sentences, the focus is on the recipient of the action rather than the doer. The subject of the sentence is the one receiving the action, not performing it. Right? So the subject here is the children, but they are the ones receiving the action, not performing the action. So another one, the letter was written by Sally. Right? The letter was written by Sally. So we are focusing on the letter, not on Sally, who is the doer of the action, who wrote the letter. Okay. So we could say Sally wrote the letter. The children ate the cake, right? For you to convert them from being passive to active. Okay, so you can also spot the by phrase, like I've said before. So passive sentences often, but not always, include a phrase with starting with by, that tells or who or what performed the action, right? But in most cases, this part can be omitted if the doer is unknown or unimportant. So you can say the book was read by many students. So the by phrase indicates who performed the action. So many is many students. Okay, many students read the book. It becomes active, right? So in terms of active voice, it makes, like I've said before, it makes the sentence clearer and more direct. So active sentences You have the subject performing the action, and the verb does not use the auxiliary to be. So those verbs of that I've said that are the eight forms. So passive voice, it's not a grammatical error. It's not a grammatical error, and it may be used in academic writing, but the only problem is that it leads to more words than necessary. Usually, the sentence becomes overly word sentences, and that affects the clarity of the sentence, and hence the comprehension of the message. Right? 1, 2. Readers also they get frustrated or confused. Right? You have to wait until they find out who or what did the action of the sentence. Later, after they had already started, after they've been reading, then later they only, at the end of the sentence, that's where that information is, right? So which is not, which is something that can confuse or frustrate the readers, of your text. These are examples. Use active voice. Using active voice makes sentence clearer and more direct. Examples. This is the first example. The 18th. I normally use examples from economics because I'm from economic and management sciences, but I try to include other examples also that just relate to just the life in general, or that are not really field specific. Okay, the 1780 Constitution of Massachusetts was written by John Adams, right? Was written by John Adams. So that is a passive sentence. You can revise it. John Adams wrote the 1780 Massachusetts Constitution. Example 2, a decision was reached to postpone the vote. So you should be able to define the object and also to identify the object as well as identify the subject within the sentence. Then if you can do that, then you'll be able to change it from a passive to an active sentence. So this could be revised to the committee decided to postpone the vote, right? The letter was taken to the mailbox by Sally. Sally took the letter to the mailbox. So you're more direct. But there are sometimes when we use passive voice just for us to avoid, being making sort of direct claims that at a later stage possibly we cannot support. Then we choose to use an active, a passive form, right? Okay, still on clarity, you have to define complex terms. Always define any specialized terms or jargon that your audience may not be familiar with. So it's very important that at the beginning, don't define the complex terms later. After I finish reading, then I find the definition of the complex terms. No, this must be very close, possibly just after introducing, then you define those complex terms so that as I move forward, I have a clear understanding of the specialized terms or the technical jargons that you are using and be familiar with them, right? Break down complex ideas. If a concept is difficult to understand, break it into smaller parts and explain each one, also linking the relationship between those parts as well. Use clear definitions and examples. When introducing new or complex ideas, provide definitions and examples to clarify your point. It's always important. It enhances understanding. For example, for instance, then you provide an example that clearly explain, what that concept that you are introducing or an idea that you are introducing, if that idea is a complex idea. Use signpost as well. So those transitional words and phrases, first, however, in conclusion, we always use these words. So sometimes we don't know what we are doing, but we use them. Anyone who is a good writer, if you have written a piece of text and you got a good marks for that, or you were told that this is a good piece of writing, then it means you have used these kind of words. Sometimes we also refer to them as logical connectors. Right, logical connectors, so or linking devices, so that you use to connect sentence, the glue that you use to put sentences together for a coherent text, right? Speaking to the topic that you are topic understudy, and also as relating to the message that you want to convey to the reader. It's important to read aloud. Reading your writing aloud can help you identify awkward phrasing, confusing sentences, sentence structure, and overly complex language. So it's important that yourself, you assume a role of a writer, an editor, and a reader of your work when you're doing it. So you have to read or approach the text in those different forms, so that they are able to identify mistakes that you'll be making before the work, and rectify that before the work goes out, or before someone else, you give the work to someone else to read. Okay, revise and edit, review, writing multiple times to identify areas where clarity can be improved. I have whenever a strategy that I use, whenever I write, before I start writing maybe a paragraph for today or a sentence that I want to write, I go and read maybe 2 paragraphs that I've written previously. And in many cases, you find that that is not really what you wanted to say. Because sometimes we write whilst we are tired. We write whilst we are tired, then you end up just writing things that you are thinking at that time that they are making sense. But when you read them whilst you are sort of refreshed, whilst you have rejuvenated, you find that that is not what you intended to write. You can even question yourself that what was I talking about, or is it me who was writing? So it's important for you to revise and edit your work as you write. Okay. Then we have the issue of on the issue of conciseness. Be direct and straight to the point. Right? Be direct and straight to the point. So this is where now we that example applies, where I was talking about a public speaker and an academic writer. That for public speaking, yes, you can tell the people what you're going to talk about it, and tell them what you just spoke about. But in academic writing, that all becomes repetitive. You cannot tell us what you're going to write about it, and then tell us what you have written about. So that will become repetitive. So you have to go straight to the point. For a public speaker, it enhances a comprehension of the message that the audience is intended for the audience. But for academic writing, it actually confuses the reader, and the reader can easily be lost in the text. So some examples. This is a concise statement. Steve, would you like to meet for dinner today at night? Right. So that is just straight to the point. You're not beating about the bush, or just going, doing a merry-go-round first, then you ask the question that you want to ask at the end. So this is a sentence that is unconcise. Steve, I'm getting hungry. I was wondering if you were hungry too. When people are hungry, that is a sign that they need to eat. Since we might both be hungry, I was perhaps wondering if you might care to join me for a meal in the near future. Right? I think even yourself, even myself, I even feel like I want to laugh. So this is the point. Of course, the person is hungry, but he's talking about the meal, having a meal in the near future. You understand? So it's not clear, because if you're hungry, you want to eat now. So you want maybe to go out to go and grab something to eat. But the message is not really the way that I would receive it. I would think that it's a dinner that is maybe it should be scheduled some time in the future. Right. So you can see that usually a sentence that is unconcise, it's overly long. It's overly long. You take long for you to just reach the intended message, or to deliver the intended message to the recipient. Then, okay, you must be direct and straight to the point. Get straight to the main idea without unnecessary background or filler. Right. So background information or filler information. Ask yourself these questions. Is my message direct and to the point? Are there extra words in the message? Is there a more direct way to phrase the request? And can the reader answer the question without having to request clarification from you? So if I have to ask you, what are you talking about? Then already you must know that I did not receive your message well. I beg your pardon. What can you please rephrase, or can you say what are you saying? Right. So it means the person is not understood. So if you ask your questions, those particular questions, then you'll be able to address these issues of conciseness. So it's also important to avoid vague generalities, general statements which are not detailed, or obvious statements. Right. For example, all animals that have feathers are birds. Right. So we know that animals that have feathers, they are birds. Right. So you don't have to state that all animals that have feathers, then they are birds. So it's birds that have feathers. Avoid the use of idle words, empty rhetoric, or insincere or exaggerated talk. So this one, I've seen it a lot. So using modifiers such as obviously, absolutely, fortunately, hopefully, really, totally. Okay, of course, we do right. I also do the same as well. I use them, um, often. Like saying the start is very important in this, in that 1, 2, 3, 4. No. If it's important, the reader will see that it's up to the reader to judge that it's important. So they just make the sentence sound forceful, right? You're sort of imposing that this is important. Whether you like it or not, this is important. And it's not a good way of writing. But sometimes it's important as well to highlight, because I've seen when you write papers, the reviewers want to see that part that says, this is the significance of success. So you have to mention that. If you don't write that, even if they see the significance, it's like they might not even see the significance, even if the significance is there, but written in another form. So also automatic and other word phrases. That is phrases that contributes nothing to a discussion. So that such phrases include, I've just listed some here. At this point in time, you can simply say now, currently, then. Due to the fact that, you can say because. As a matter of fact, in fact. In spite of the fact that, even though. In case, if. In any case, anyway. Make use of, use. In the final analysis, finally. Right. So we use, so those words it's normally used when maybe you want the word count to be more. You don't have things to write, then you just want to make even a phrase that you can write in 2 words, then you want to provide the 4 or 5 words for that phrase. But it also just result in word phrases that makes your sentences unnecessarily long, and it disturbs the clarity of the message that you want to give, right? Also avoid redundancy, that is needless repetition. Avoid repeating the same information, right? So that is what we call, redundancy, redundant phrases. For example, instead of saying each and every student, you can just say every student. When you say each, the same as every, isn't it? You can even say each student, not say each and every. You're saying the same thing in one sentence. Like I've said, that in public speaking, you're encouraged to tell the audience what you're going to say it, and then tell the audience what you have said. Repetition helps listeners understand, but in academics, you have to go straight to the point. It helps the readers all to understand, right? Then there's an issue, whilst still on redundant phrase and needless repetition. These are words that are considered redundant phrases also. First ever, right? So it's like you are saying the same thing. Full and complete. If it's complete, then it's full. Red in color. What else can be red? It's only color, isn't it? So it's red in color. It can be read in what? Personal opinion. So your opinion is also personal, right? Past history. I've seen text like that in the past history. So the past, of course, the past is the history, isn't it? History is also past. Each and every, right? In each, there's also every, isn't it? In every, there's each. Final result, some it might sound we always write the final result is this. But when you say final result, it's often considered needless repetition because the word final itself, it inherently implies the end result. When you say final, we are saying that is the end result. So when you use both to say in one sentence, then you are sort of repeating. So the phrase "the result" is sufficient and more concise. Okay. So the result, this is the result, well, this is the final result, right? Then we also have what are called, it's encouraged to use elliptical constructions. So elliptical constructions, these are special clauses in English in which certain words are omitted. Okay, so you help to avoid unneeded repetition. This is example, first example, elliptical clause. No one played more minutes in the game yesterday than I, right? So that is sort of an elliptical clause. But you can write it in a long form where you say, no one played more minutes in the game than I played in the game. Okay, so you can remove that part in brackets, played in the game. Then you just say than I. Then it's more shortened, more clearer. So when you say than I, is the elliptical clause that has been removed. You see, so you are encouraged to write in that form. Then there's also an issue of practicing what is called euphemism. So usually we replace inoffensive word or phrases that replaces, in fact, make use of inoffensive word or phrase that replaces harsh or inappropriate words. So it helps writers navigate potentially offensive or controversial subjects without causing unnecessary discomfort or conflict. So remember, sometimes what is acceptable within our norms might not be acceptable in other cultures or in certain circumstances or certain specific settings, right? So that's where you see now these words instead of saying a person is unemployed, you rather say that the person is between jobs, right? If a person is fired, you say the person is laid off. Lie, you say they are disinforming or this is disinformation. A person is sick, ill health, obese, full-bodied, defecate, take a stool. So these are kind of words, but usually they also result in word phrases as well. Okay, but they help us navigate certain controversial issues that can otherwise create unnecessary attention for you later, right? Then you have to be selective with examples. It's not like everything that you write, it must be accompanied by an example. Okay, that's not it. So there are certain, where necessary, then you can use examples. You don't have to use them excessively. Okay. And they have to be relevant examples as well that directly support the argument that you are making. Editing ruthlessly. After drafting your work, review it for parts that are redundant or repetitive and trim them down. So that is the importance of reading, going over your text and editing the text yourself. If it doesn't make sense for you, then it doesn't make sense for the next person. If the sentences are overly long for you, then they are also overly long for the intended recipient of the message. And whether a sentence is long or not, it's really a subjective issue, right? But a rule of thumb that is usually used is that if a sentence is more than 3 lines, then it becomes an overly long sentence. right? But that is just based on the preference of you, who is reading your text or who you are working with, students, the supervisor, the preference of the supervisor. And I know that a lot of times such comments, are given as feedback that your sentence is long, it's not clearly understandable. So sometimes I always say that it's easy to just sort of criticize the text that one has written by passing those sort of vague comments that do not try to lead the writer in a specific direction in addressing it. That should always be complemented by where suggestions can be made. Then those suggestions should be there, and then sometimes even just showing what is it that can be done to shorten those kind of sentences, right? Then so it is also I've talked about being selective with examples. I've talked about editing ruthlessly, then being specific, using precise numbers, dates, and names rather than vague terms like many, several. Right. So we write like that. Many years ago. How many years ago? There are many years that have already passed us. Over the previous centuries, how many previous centuries have we passed? There are many. So be specific. The 21st century, the 20th century, 19th century. If it's a spanning over 10 years, then over 10 years. Don't say over the past years. How many past years? Okay. So, for example, 20% of participants is clearer than a large number of participants. So be specific. Wherever you can be specific, be specific. Instead of saying many factors, be specific, like 3 major factors or economic, social, and environmental factors. Break them down. Then the issue of still on precision, clarify ambiguous terms and avoid ambiguity. Define words or phrases that could have multiple meaning depending on the context. For instance, terms like significant can be unclear unless they're explained in context. Significant, you can have results that are significant. Right? You can also use significant as in terms of maybe importance of something. So when introducing specialized or technical terms, define them clearly and consistently. Apply that consistently. Don't say sometimes this word means this, then later you use the same word again, meaning something else. So this will help avoid confusion for the reader. So as an example, in this start, sustainability refers to the ability of a community to maintain its resources for future generations, right? Instead of saying it is effective, say the intervention was effective in reducing student absenteeism, for example, so that you are add more clarity to the phrase or to the sentence. So for better comprehension of the message that you want to pass. Then in terms of precision as well, use terminologies accurately. So ensure that specialized terms are used correctly, particularly in fields like science, law, and social sciences as well. Right. So you have to make sure that terminologies, they must be used correctly. If you use a wrong word, right, then that becomes the phrase already is affected. Right. So yeah, also affecting issues of clarity. Grammar is wrong, and then the message ultimately it will tend to be distorted. That is if it's even understandable. Choose the right words, use precise vocabulary that accurately reflects the idea that you want to convey. So, example, instead of do or make, use more specific verbs like conduct, analyze, create. I'm doing a start. No, just say, be more specific. I'm conducting a start. I'm performing, an analysis. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. So be more specific. Then avoiding overgeneralizing. Be cautious about making sweeping claims that may not be true for all cases. So this, even during the time when you're conceptualizing your study, you should be able to have this in mind. Are the results that are going to be obtained are the conclusions that you are going to make, be able to be generalized over, a particular, setting, like for example, nationally, globally, and so on. You can't go and just perform a study on just one company in possibly one municipality in South Africa. Then you will say that whatever that you are going to find then relates to the whole of South Africa, or generalize it globally, then you're overgeneralizing. So that also has to be important. So usually the use of statements like most, some, or in certain context, when appropriate, it's very important to qualify your statements, right? Make sure to support claims with evidence and be specific about the scope of your statements. For instance, studies show that 60% of people prefer X is more precise than people generally prefer X. You see, so be specific. How many people prefer X? So you can show about the magnitude. It's also important. Then still on precision, it's important for you to clarify relationships between ideas. So use linking words, phrases to explicitly show the relationship between ideas. So most important, it's important to show cause and effect, making comparisons, contrast, or generating a particular sequence. As an example, as a result, consequently, in contrast, and for example, can guide readers through your arguments and make connections clearer. Right, so those are mostly logical connectors as well that you use when you are joining sentences together, and when you are also joining paragraphs together. Remember, no sentence is an island, no paragraph is an island. Everything, it must be glued together coherently, for speaking to the topic that you are answering and to the conclusions that you are going to make when you have achieved your objectives and answered the questions that you initially posed. Okay, use data and statistics. Where applicable, incorporate numbers, percentages, or statistical data to add precision to your claims. Example, the survey revealed that 75% of respondents preferred option A over option B. Don't just say the respondents preferred option A over option B. Give us some numbers, right? Be specific about timeframes when discussing events or research. Include a specific time frame to avoid ambiguity. Over the past 5 years is more precise than in recent years. Review for consistency. Ensure that the terms, definitions, and references are consistent throughout your paper. Inconsistent use of terms can cause confusion and reduce precision. As an example, if you introduce the term global warming, be consistent in using it instead of switching between global warming and sometimes you say climate change. Unless you make a clear distinction between the two, or rather indicate that these two terms will be used interchangeably within the study, so that we know that when you say global warming, you are referring to sustainability, right? Or when you say climate change, you are referring to global warming rather. Then be careful with pronouns. Ensure pronouns like these, they, it clearly refer to a specific noun. Ambiguous pronouns can make your writing unclear. Example, instead of this is important, say the ability to analyze data is important. So, and mostly when also you use these pronouns, they must always be immediate, within the immediate sentences following where you have just actually used the noun itself, right? So don't say this referring to something that you have already referred to paragraphs ago. So it should be within the same paragraph, or usually, preferably, maybe the next sentence following where the noun has been used. then you can maybe use it, they, to refer to your writing rather than repeating the noun over and over and over, right? Use active voice. Active voice tends to be more direct, precise rather than passive voice. It specifies the doer of the action, making sentences clear. I think I've talked about that before. The researcher analyzed the data. It's clearer than the data was analyzed by the researcher, right? So it's important to use to prefer active voice rather than passive voice. Then still on precision, review and edit for clarity. So it's always important that you also review. Then areas where you find things that are vague or you need to clarify meaning, then you clarify the meaning or remove such phrases or further rephrase vague phrases. Um, like I've said, you are the writer, you are the editor or proofreader, and you are also the intended reader of the work at first when you are preparing your text. Then, in always another eye helps. So a colleague, maybe someone within your field, and so on. They can be help of used to try to maybe sort of identify or flag out areas that will be lacking or contravening particular rules regarding to language, grammar, and sentence construction. Right. So these are tips that I can leave you in terms of academic writing. So for clarity, conciseness, and precision, use straightforward language to ensure your arguments are easily understood and avoid redundancy to keep the writing tight and impactful, right? So don't just use words that will create redundancy within your text, right? Then also use of formal language. Academic writing typically avoids contractions, don't becomes do not, slang and informal expressions to maintain professionalism. So you have to avoid that. And also keep your tone neutral and avoid using first-person pronouns, especially in South African setting. But that also depends on maybe the audience, because I've seen that some mostly American journals, they do not have an inclination towards this. So you can even use the refer to yourself in the first person. I've I found this, or we using we, without having to be asked that who are you referring to? We found this, or we find this. You understand? So you can be able to use the first person, but otherwise use the third person. Refer to the study itself rather than referring to yourself. The study finds that, then you can talk about it. Then also, academic writing, it's evidence-based. Cite credible sources to back your claims and avoid unsupported assertions. Right? If you assert something, then make sure that it's supported. Demonstrate that there's also others who are supporting what I'm saying, or there are others who are against what I'm saying. So you have to it can be two ways. It's not only support that you find in literature, but you can also find divergence as well, right? Contrasting perspectives. So use primary sources when possible and ensure proper citation formatting. So wherever there's a primary source, refer to the primary source. Don't do secondary citations whilst the source you could access the source, and draw the information that you want to draw from the source yourself, right? Write it in your own way. Okay. Structure, organize your paper logically with a clear introduction, body paragraphs, and a concise conclusion. Each paragraph should have a topic sentence that introduces its main idea. Then you support it by supporting sentences. And then you conclude it by the last sentence that you write, which is a concluding sentence. So that is always important. And these are some tips that I must leave you in terms of academic writing and making sure that clarity, conciseness, and precision is maintained. And I've also use of examples that shows you this concept of clarity, conciseness, and precision, and how they can be violated, and as well as also how they can be addressed. So these are my concluding remarks. Improving clarity, conciseness, and precision leads to more effective and professional academic text. It also makes text not only understood, but also leaves a lasting impact on the reader. Remember, we judge you with the text that you, the way that you write. If I receive your text, the way that you have packaged your text. If you make errors, grammatical errors and spelling errors, I will not take you seriously. And sometimes your work is rejected not because the idea is not attractive or it doesn't contribute to existing knowledge or to the conversation or to discourse within your field, but it's because you are not serious. Okay, you are not serious. So they say do not judge a book by its cover, but we do judge a book by its cover, right? If it's torn, we might not even read the book. Okay, so you must make sure that the way that you present your work, first impression, last. Academic writing is a skill that improves over time with practice, right? I always say writing, it is a process. It's not an event. It does not take place today and it ends today, right? Even the purpose of these conversations that we are having, the purpose of these workshops, all the other services that we offer as the RCD, they are aimed at enhancing your research capacity, right? So which means at the end, we will be happy not to see you one day because you have understood how to navigate and you have become independent in your own research writing, and also even imparting the skills that you have acquired from us to others. Okay, remember, knowledge is perpetual. We have to pass it from one person to the other. It's our duty to create the next generation of researchers, which means we have to pass it so that knowledge continues to move forward and evolve. Right. With that, I close the presentation and open the floor for a discussion and questions and contribution, sharing of personal experiences that you may have with us regarding this topic that we have looked at of clarity, conciseness, and precision in academic writing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gabriel, for that comprehensive workshop and discussion. And I trust that everyone attending will learn from the points that Dr. Gabriel has elaborated on. Like Dr. Gabriel mentioned, he is now opening the floor. We would like to hear your voices. I have enabled all mics, so you can go ahead and unmute yourself if you have a question or a comment, or if you're simply unclear about any aspect of this presentation, please feel free to engage with our facilitator, Dr. Gabriel. Okay. You can also type your question in the chat if you're feeling shy to speak. We can address any questions or concerns that you may have. Okay, I see that Sibaya is typing. Okay, Dr. Gabriel, we're just waiting for one question to come through on the chat. Um, but in the meantime, I would want to just impress upon you the registering to the RCDMS system. If you need help, like I previously mentioned, we are here. We have onboarding sessions uh, going from the 9th to the 23rd of this month, and I've posted the link in the chat. There's also the feedback survey that I've also posted in the chat. So when you get time, can you please fill it out? It will really help us in planning future workshops. All right, we've got a comment from Sabaya says, no questions from my end, just a thank you for the presentation. I realized that I am writing my research in a passive voice, so I will fix that.
Yeah,
So
thank you, Sibia, for that. Yeah, I think that this is the essence of these workshops. At least if it's able, sort of enhance your writing, and you are able to acquire particular skills that you can use to make your text read better. So I'm happy to hear that.
that's good. Dr. Gabriel, I just wanted to ask, when it comes to the conciseness and precision and clarity, um, I'm speaking from my own experience within science, chemistry specifically. It sometimes gets a little difficult to write concisely because of the big words that you need to use. And some can refer to it as jargon. How would one get around that, specifically within the science disciplines?
Thank you, Miss Andrea. Yeah, I also struggle. At one time, I've edited a number of papers that come from health sciences, and also I've seen text as well from your department, from the chemistry department as well, including one of your papers as well. I must say that. So I think there is particular terminology that we cannot avoid, right?
Yes.
Okay, in anything, let me just say, even when we write, there must be some form of field specific knowledge that we are having for you to
Mm.
be able to comprehend something, right? So it is difficult usually when you write as a scientist, maybe you also write for the scientific audience, isn't it? Right?
Yes.
Rather than maybe for those from the social sciences as such, because those within the scientific domain, they are able to maybe understand the specific terminology. But remember, there are also other issues that just relate to writing in general. We share a lot of generally agreed writing conventions that are not field specific.
Specific.
Grammar,
Okay.
if it's wrong, it's wrong. Even if in your field as well, wrong grammar is wrong grammar, wrong spelling, even of those big words, if it's wrong, it's wrong. So there are certain things that we expect that we cannot change. South Africa remains South Africa.
Yes.
You understand?
Yes.
A particular maybe chemical, if only that is the name of that particular chemical, it won't change to another name. But wherever you can make it easily understandable, then if it have another name that is easy, yeah, there are certain terms that have other. There's a time when I did I did advanced first aid with Red Cross. There are certain terminologies we did during the first phase. There are certain terms that we were using, but when it was advanced, certain things that we could say easily, they became like big words
Okay.
to explain them. They became scientific, but they could also be explained easily
Simply.
understood by a layman simply. But then at a later stage, they became advanced and changed completely.
Mhm.
Right. So in such cases, then depending on your audience that you are targeting, you can also try maybe to bring it down to their level.
Okay, okay. No, I completely understand. No, thank you for that. One last question or comment from my side. Sometimes when you are writing, specifically a thesis, and you are sitting for long hours, and you're trying to get a point across or a concept across, I find sometimes that maybe stepping away from your desk or laptop and coming back maybe after 10 minutes or 15 minutes can help um, regarding your sentence structure and your clarity. What is your opinion on this? Like, what is your take on this?
I
You know?
I I fully 100% agree with you. And this is a technique that I also applied, over the years, especially when I was doing my master's and PhD. I find that I was a person who would be more productive at night, right? So I would work more at night in some cases, but sometimes the work forces you to work even during the day. So during the day you're working, then at night as well you are working. And when you are tired, you make a lot of mistakes and you don't even see them. And sometimes you can't even just, even to just write a summary, it would be difficult for me to summarize what I've written before. It would be difficult for me even just to conclude or to write an introduction, to try to just crack a particular, to start writing a particular section. But what I used to do as well, I would sleep. Even if I sleep maybe for 2 hours or 3 hours, when I wake up again, I'm more rejuvenated. And what I could not write maybe the previous night, in the early hours of the morning, I could maybe be able to put down something very meaningful. So I do
Thank
understand and sort of subscribe to this notion that you are putting forward before us. That it's a very a strategy that have proven to work for me, and I think also it works. It will work for others, and it is working for others.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Gabriel. Um, so participants, once again, I would like to thank you for participating in this workshop. Before I let you go, I just wanted to hear from you. Firstly, was this workshop helpful to you? And secondly, is there something on your mind that you would want the RCD to cover in terms of future workshops? Is there a topic that you are unclear about and maybe seek guidance from RCD and you haven't seen a workshop with that title on our schedule and you may want us to discuss it, take you through it? I think now is the time. You can unmute your mic and let me know your thoughts, your suggestions, or you can pop it in the chat, and I'll definitely address it. Just let me know so that we can improve our support to postgraduate students.
Yeah, I think maybe whilst we are waiting for them for the participants to just add maybe something in that regard, it's important, yeah, for us to be able to tailor our support, towards the specific needs that we might have as students, as staff as well. Because I know that this is open. There are also members of the staff who are also studying as well. This is open to all postgraduate students. This conversation that we are having, and I also want to just sort of offer my appreciation, for the audience that we were having today, and for the support that you continue to show us from one workshop to another workshop. And we are also of the hope that the message that we are giving in delivering in these sessions are relevant, timely, and enhance the quality of your writing and overall to overall completion of the studies that you are undertaking. So from my side, I thank you. I hand over to you, Ms. Andrea.
All right, I see that there is Nondisa in the chat that is busy typing. So hopefully she will be letting us know what they would want in a future workshop. Um, okay, I see another person that is Svaya that's also typing in the chat. All right. Okay, Nondisa, I just wanted to ask if you didn't attend the work event, does that mean you can't access the recording? Um, so currently on Moodle, Nandisa, I'm not too sure if you know Moodle. You can find it on Ulink. You get into Moodle and you can then basically navigate to workshops, 2025 workshops specifically. You should be registered in one of those communities. Um, However, if you're if you're having a difficulty, you can email us on rcdinquiries@uj@ac.za, and we will basically try to help you navigate to where the 2025 workshops are so you can access the slides from today and the recording.
This also includes previous workshops and other events that we have done in the past that we have uploaded on those Moodle communities. So it's important. Just let us know if you are, if you are enrolled on the relevant Moodle community. Depending on the level of your studies.
Yes. Another thing is you can also access this via the RCDMS. So if you've registered on the system and you have registered for this event, you can go back and look at the recording. The recording will be there on that calendar. So it is available if you've missed it. Um, okay, so Sibaya is still typing. Okay, I think that's it. All right, if there's no further questions, comments, or suggestions, participants, I would like to thank you for your time, for attending. We really appreciate it. More specifically, Dr. Gabriel, I want to thank you for your hard work, your effort and time, and for supporting the RCD unit. We really do appreciate it. And to the participants, we really hope to see you in the future workshops because remember that you are not alone in your postgraduate journey. We are here to support you every step of the way. So thank you and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you, Ms. Andrea. And I also just want to acknowledge we have seen the contribution that has been made by Sibia, where she's sort of suggesting that in future, we can cover aspects on how to ensure that how maybe sort of students can link or compare their study objectives to literature instead of just summarizing different papers. So I think that we will address that. We have had also workshops in the past where we have addressed the literature review, and that is also one aspect because the literature review itself, it relates to the objectives that you want to achieve, and also the questions that you were asking is broadly relating to the topic. Understand? Okay, so but thank you for that. We'll sort of have in future a workshop that will be dedicated to that.
Yes, thank you so much. All right, I think that's it for today and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.